war on drugs that the federal government has waged and on which it has spent billions and billions of taxpayer dollars has been a complete waste of time, money, and effort. Take marijuana, for instance. It's been grouped together and enforced by the Drug Enforcement Administration with real hardcore drugs like heroin, cocaine, and methamphetamine. But states like California and soon New Jersey have pretty much legalized marijuana for medicinal purposes, while the federal government contends that something in marijuana has the potential to promote cancer. Patients of cancer and other similar ailments actually use marijuana to fight these deadly diseases. So wouldn't the federal government be better off creating the incentive to empower people to make the right choice, to make their own free choice, rather than persecuting them and prosecuting them for what the feds consider to be the wrong choice? Joining me now is Paul Armentano, Deputy Director of NORML and of the NORML Foundation. Paul's recent book on the marijuana policy subject is called Marijuana is Safer, So Why Are They Driving Us to Drink? Paul is an expert on the subject of marijuana and marijuana policy. Paul, welcome to Freedom Watch.
Thank you for having me.
Can the legitimate, prescribed, controlled use of marijuana diminish the effects of certain cancers?
Well, we've known this. Well, when I say we, I should refer to scientists in this field. And in fact, our own federal government has known since about 1975 that the active compounds in marijuana, known as the cannabinoids, things like THC and several other unique properties, actually have the ability to selectively target cancer cells and kill those cells, sort of the holy grail for cancer research. And frustratingly, the federal government has not funded appropriately clinical trials in humans on this sort of work. But we've known that marijuana has these effects in animals now for over 3 decades.
Is the federal government currently, we all know about the Raich case in California, a horrible Supreme Court opinion that basically said the federal government can, under the Interstate Commerce Clause, regulate marijuana that is not commerce and doesn't move interstate, basically ban you from growing it in your own backyard. But does the present Justice Department under President Obama enforce the federal government's antediluvian and draconian laws on marijuana in states where the state government authorizes physicians to prescribe it for medicinal purposes?
Well, clearly this is less of a priority for this administration than it was the previous administration. When now President Obama was campaigning, he actually pledged not to use federal justice resources to target individuals in these 13 states that allow for the medical use of marijuana under state law. And he has, for the most part, upheld that promise. There has been some limited activity in California where the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration has still gone in and essentially raided third-party providers of marijuana to certain patients. What's very interesting with these raids is that no criminal charges are ever filed. The federal government comes in, they kick down some doors, they seize some merchandise, they seize cash, they seize computers, and then they leave.
Wow. It's just an effort to steal a product and to frustrate something on the cutting edge of medicine. A long time ago, when the Congress decided in its great wisdom to make marijuana illegal, were there any sound studies or any reasons given for it? Or did some of them just say, well, you know what, people can get high on this. We had the problem with prohibition. We might as well get rid of marijuana as well.
Well, keep in mind, the federal government first got involved in the marijuana prohibition business all the way back in 1937. And now when you look at the actual transcripts from those hearings, we laugh at them, even though they were the foundation for marijuana prohibition. The government's argument at that time was that if you use marijuana, you will go insane and you will be inspired to commit acts of violence and murder. And that was the government's basis for making the drug illegal in 1937.
There was probably also some prejudice against immigrants because of the tendency at the time for some folks from Latin America where marijuana was not unlawful at the time to bring the product or to bring the seeds northward into the U.S. with them?
Oh, there most certainly was. There is some often quoted testimony from the floor of the State House, I believe in Texas, where a legislator said all Mexicans are crazy and they're crazy because they use this drug. So that clearly did play a role in the initial founding of Prohibition. Of course, today marijuana is illegal because it is a Schedule I drug along with heroin, LSD, along with heroin, LSD, and certain other illicit drugs, as you mentioned earlier. And
right.
it is, and to address the question you asked, ironically, when the federal government classified marijuana in 1970 as a Schedule I drug, under the same legislation, Congress was to appoint a nonpartisan commission to review marijuana and its health effects, to make determinations on public policy. And that commission, known as the Schaefer Commission, reported in 1972 and recommended to Congress and to President Nixon that marijuana not be a Schedule I drug and that its possession and use by adults no longer be a criminal offense. Of course, Congress and the President ignored that report,
right.
Continuing the prohibition that we still have today.
We're chatting with Paul Armentano from NORML about whether or not it is wise, whether or not it is moral, and whether or not it is constitutional for the federal government to prosecute people who grow or use marijuana. Which is more harmful statistically, Paul? The moderate use of marijuana or the moderate use of alcohol? Or, I'll give you a different case, the excessive use of marijuana versus the excessive use of alcohol. Balance them for me or tell me which causes more harm to society.
Well, if we are looking at either the harm caused by the drug to the individual user or if we're looking at the harm caused by drug use to society, clearly alcohol is the far more detrimental substance. And quite interestingly, Rasmussen Reports did a national poll on this very issue about 2-3 weeks ago where they asked voting adults which substance they believe to be more dangerous. And surprisingly, given all of the government's prohibition and propaganda regarding cannabis, 51% of those polled said that, in fact, alcohol was the more dangerous substance. Only 19% of those respondents said, in fact, marijuana was the more dangerous substance. So the public understands this issue. They have it right. It's the law that has it wrong.
Do you think we'll ever get to the point where the government will let us make our own choices, even if they're bad choices, even if they're stupid choices, but they're our own choices about what we put in our body, as long as whatever we put in doesn't harm somebody else?
Let's certainly hope so. I mean, that is one of the main reasons why this prohibition of marijuana is so detrimental. The federal government has drawn an arbitrary line that says adults can put certain substances in their body and then other substances they cannot put in their body. And that line is not based on science. It's not based on potential dangers to the user or potential dangers to society. As I noted, it's strictly an arbitrary line. Yet we have arrested in this country over 20 million Americans since 1965 on marijuana offenses. Almost 90% of those arrested were arrested for simple possession only. Yet if we go back to 1965, we will see that marijuana is more prevalent today than it was then, that young people have easier access to marijuana than they did then, that marijuana is more potent today than it was then, and that there is more violence associated with the illegal drug trafficking of marijuana today than it was then. We've literally spent tens of billions of dollars and ruined millions of people's personal and professional lives, but we have not in any way disrupted the flow of marijuana to this country, nor have we dissuaded anyone from using marijuana in this country. It is time to acknowledge this reality and regulate marijuana in a manner similar to alcohol.
Paul Armentano, thanks for joining us on Freedom Watch.
Thanks for having me.
You can catch today's show on foxnews.com/freedomwatch and on Sirius 145, XM 168, or online at foxnewstalk.com at 6 p.m. Eastern Saturdays. From New York, defending freedom. Until the next time, stay free.